it's almost irresponsible that you only do your research on one news media article when you're trying to find something that may have that bias. You should really do a little bit more. It doesn't take much. And I see with like, I think Grok does it for sure, and I think some of them do cite their sources when you do search for things. So that's great. But doing something with what Ground News does, I think, is really smart to do, especially when you start to get political or anything.
And maybe that's where there actually needs to be some sort of regulatory AI that filters things, where you can say, right, this is the region I'm selecting and the certain guidelines that I'd like it to adhere to, and actually acts as an intermediary between certain models, and potentially even marking them as, right, this could be this is seen
Isn't that
as
just, it's still just moving that responsibility to another AI model.
Yeah.
If that AI model's compromised, it's kind of just like moving the goalpost to like another AI model.
It's much more difficult for collusion like that, isn't it? So if you had two independently created models, for there to be, if right, these have completely different origins, it may.
You need a governing AI body that watches all the other AIs. That's bipartisan.
AI model.
Yes. And that's what I'm keen to kind of think about as well. But I wanted to touch on a few of the things that, because these sort of manipulations of a model and, changing or sort of pushing a certain narrative can have such profound political ramifications, and whether this is domestically or internationally. But obviously, it's unlike sort of overt propaganda. It's not seen that clearly, so it's much more sort of insidious in how it would disseminate the information. So we look at a few of the ways this could play out. So we look at subtle mass persuasion and narrative control. So you've got gradual shaping of public opinion. So just by small tweaks, downplaying historical events slightly more and more, or emphasizing sort of particular ideological perspectives, or even just flat out blocking alternative viewpoints. It would be quite easy for an organization or a government to just start slowly steering that public perception over time. And also allow them to...
Sorry, it just reminds me of that quote, sorry, Brent, just because it popped in my head. Like, that famous quote, history is written by the victor. And it's kind of like the same thing with like this in a way. It's like, the history of a country is like now being written almost by, the data and AI is trained with, you're just going to rely on that. Yeah, sorry, a bit of a tangent. Just like
no, it's absolutely
kind of jumps into my head there in a kind of way. And whichever AI models win the AI war are going to be the victor, right? And we're kind of like then determining our knowledge sources, based on those victors. So, yeah.
And also the fact that
interesting.
Just inherently people generally... they hear a fact, they don't necessarily fact check it. I mean, the number of facts I can think of that something my parents would have told me that you question 40 years later and you're like, whoa, that wasn't true at all. But I never questioned it. And it's those sort of slowly, almost...
Columbus didn't just discover America.
Yeah.
So, those, what are passed as maybe neutral facts would slowly just become ordinary, become common knowledge, but they're based, on not on the truth at all. And, then slowly shaping global perception from that as well.
Do you see a potential need? I mean, AI agents obviously are the big thing, and having personal AI agents doing things for you. But is this almost like how cybersecurity, they have ways to block attacks and things like that? Why can't we create an AI agent that says, well, wait a minute, this article is 35% incorrect or 75% leaning this way, or whatever the case is, and maybe just like a quick visual, because obviously no one wants to even do the research, so why not just say, hey, this might be false, or this might be like a Snopes almost, where fact checks everything.
Definitely. That would be very handy.
Interesting. And then another one is political polarization and suppression of opposition. So a couple of things like algorithmic amplification of preferred ideologies, which is interesting, because you imagine if the chatbots could slowly start, their algorithm would be like, well, no, let's promote content that aligns with our ruling party's ideology, and then we'll just downrank and not really mention any of the dissenting voices. So that becomes much more prominent, and people buy into that more, or even going to silence critics and political dissidents. So things like if there are opposing viewpoints, it labels them as misinformation or extremism, and just sort of elevating those state-approved narratives.